Welcome back to the LaunchFamily Podcast, where we sit down with parents, educators, and leaders who are asking the hard questions about what it really means to raise kids in today's world. I'm your host, Jessica Shelley, mom of 6, almost 7, former educator and co-founder of LaunchFamily. Today's conversation is especially important for parents that are raising teens, and honestly for parents who can already see the teen years coming fast. My guest today is Daniel Simon, a vocation, college, and career coach at Dan Simon Solutions, former school leader, and someone who has spent decades working at the intersection of education, identity, and family dynamics. Dan has worked closely with teens and families during some of the most high-pressure seasons of life. Those middle school transitions, high school decision-making, college prep, and that emotionally loaded question so many families wrestle with, which is what's next and who decides. So what makes Dan's work stand out is that he doesn't start with resumes, majors, or 5-year plans. He starts with relationship. He helps families move out of power struggles and panic and into conversations about vocation, agency, responsibility, and ownership. Not just where a teen is going, but who they are becoming. Dan was recently on the podcast with us talking about raising teens without the power struggle. And today we're going to go even deeper into the practical tools parents need, especially in a world where technology, pressure, and comparison are louder than ever. So Dan, I'm so glad to have you back and really excited to dive into this conversation today.
Yes, thank you, Jessica. As a father of 6 and as one of 7, you hit the magic number. Ready for it? 6, 7.
Oh my
There
gosh.
it is. I had to
Please.
do it. Had to do it.
Oh, that is like my entire home life.
I
Behind the
understand.
scenes, that's what I hear all day long.
Uh,
Well, let's get practical. So because parents are listening right now and are thinking, yes, relationship matters, but what do I do on Monday morning? So maybe if you could give parents like a simple framework for these teen years, what would it be? Like what should we expect, I guess?
well, gosh, I mean, so much of this is based on what's been leading up to this point, right? So
Mhm.
if a parent tries to kind of re-inject themselves back into a child's life in their teen years when they haven't been there, it's a greater challenge, right? I mean, the teen has kind of become independent in many ways in terms of their thought, in terms of their action, right? So I would never say don't bother, but the challenge is going to be greater than relationships that have kind of already been formed throughout life, where there's that trusting relationship. I think it always comes down to um, th- coming from a place of love, right? Always.
Mhm.
And so when you think about the idea of, I had a phrase that I used in my leading, which was grace with accountability, right? And so
Mhm.
grace with accountability to me is that idea of, all right, you made a decision, it didn't work out, right? It caused harm to the family. It caused harm to yourself. Right? So but we're gonna learn through it. But there are consequences, right? I mean, and you have to be able to understand those consequences. And over time, the more proactive there you can be in having those conversations. Okay, we're gonna go to a party this weekend, right? Okay. Well, let's ask some questions. Who's going to be there? Is there going to be supervision? What kinds of things are going to be going on there? Let's talk about an escape plan, right? Let's talk about some ways in which if something happens that you don't want to be part of or that you shouldn't be part of, how do you find a way without wagging a finger at everybody and saying, you shouldn't be doing that, right? What could I be doing instead to kind of remove myself from the situation, right? So there's a great comfort in that saying, no, you can't go. No, you can't do that versus, all right, well, let's talk about what you might experience. And you'll hear me just talk a lot about experience. This is something that I feel like this kind of generation of parenting has begun to really lose, which is the idea of, hey, when I grew up, I experienced things. I skinned my knee. I fell out of trees. I did right, but I learned from that. We've come to a place where we're protecting them so much from experiences that when they actually have to go through them, they don't know, they're not equipped to handle it. So I think it's let a kid be a kid, right? Let them have experiences. Be proactive in talking about what could happen and how would you respond if that did happen, as opposed to, I told you so afterwards,
Mhm.
or I'm not going to let you happen. You did that behind my back. You deserve what you get. Right. So it's that trusting relationship. I remember when my oldest daughter and her boyfriend at the time wanted to take a trip into New York City, and his parents were very lenient, and we were not as lenient. We had a lot of limitations, but when they asked about going to New York City, they said no, and we said, well, let's talk about everything you have to think about getting there, what you do when you get there. They were blown away. They were like, we totally thought you would have been the ones to say no. And
Mm.
my wife and I were thinking like, no, we want you to learn and experience these kinds of things, but it's good to talk about it first so you're prepared, right? So that's how I feel it comes is we've got to be careful about doing everything for them on the one extreme, not letting them do anything on the other extreme. Somewhere in the middle is where that relationship forms and where that kind of the closeness and the trust can begin to blossom.
I love that you talk about closeness and trust with the relationship too, because I think that's often something that maybe be overlooked. Like, of course, I have a great relationship with my son or my daughter, right? Like, we talk about how their school day went every day, or oh, we go out for ice cream on Sunday or Sunday after church or something, right? But the closeness and that connection piece, I think, is like that goes that step further, right? Like that trust building part of like, oh, I know that my mom trusts me to do this. And then like that's the
Mhm,
confidence booster in that experience
mhm,
too of like, oh, I can do this. Like we've talked about it. My oldest is only 9, but he's definitely like starting to like move towards like, oh, the friendship stuff is like priority over
mhm,
family. And
mhm.
like, "Can I go down to, like, the cul-de-sac?" Which is, like, across a major street, and so that was one of the conversations we had is like, "Okay, well, what do we need to be mindful of?" Or, like, what other like, what if something happens, like, safety-wise? What can you do? Or what resources do you have? Or what other
Mhm.
neighbors are around there that we know that you could then check in with?
Yeah.
Um, and that
Mhm.
also makes him feel more comfortable, I think,
Well,
and
because when
prepared for
when
that.
will he be ready, just right? I mean, he's 9, maybe
Yeah,
William, but if he doesn't learn how to do it with your support at 9,
right.
why is he gonna be any more ready at 10? Why is he gonna be any more ready at 11, right?
So true.
And I think that comes back to, we have to understand the capability, the maturity, of our children, what they're ready for, but walking alongside them, pushing it off, telling them they can't is only gonna drive them away, and it's only gonna drive them to kind of latch onto the people who are gonna say yes, but not provide the safety net to fall into or I'll be watching from across the street or guiding you along the way, and that's important. We gotta, again, stop s thinking that the right answer is always no,
Mhm.
or I will take care of it for you. Those extremes just aren't there. My wife was a great example. When my kids were growing up, if they wanted to watch a show, right, that was maybe not, age appropriate, right,
Mhm.
she'd watch it with them.
Yeah.
My daughter even at times would roll her eyes and say, "Oh, we're gonna have to talk about this, aren't we?" Right? Because my wife would sit and watch it with her and then would say things like, that's a really kinda neat the way they fell in love like that. Isn't that great? Do do you think that's what really happens in life? Do you think that it really becomes like a literal matter of I see them, I fall in love, we're married, we have kids, and that led to great conversations about what's entertainment and what's real life,
Mm.
just to equip her to understand when I see somebody who just falls over me and wants it, this is not TV, this is real life. And so I have to be equipped to be able to ask the right kinds of questions or put myself in the right situation to walk through the things that are necessary to ensure it's really good for me.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I love that you bring up conversation too, because that's kind of like the level, like the foundation, right? Like you have to be able to talk to each other in order to even move any step forward.
Mhm.
Um, so do you have any like questions that you recommend parents can ask their teen regularly to kind of start the conversation and maybe
Mm.
instead of triggering defensiveness or, everyone's at different points in their relationship
Sure.
with teens. So, any
Sure.
guidance there?
Yeah, I think we got to keep it simple, right? In a lot of ways. I think when you start with a question like, what is something today that made you happy? What's something that happened today that brought you joy, right? That got you excited, that got right. We get them thinking about something in a positive way, right? That gets them thinking and talking and opening. And then we can follow that up with what is something that challenged you today, right? What is something that maybe didn't go the way you planned? What is something that maybe, was really hard? Or maybe you didn't even do because, you were afraid of the outcome. And then the third part to that then becomes, how can I support you? How can I help you do that better? How can I help you the next time you get to that place feel more confident to say what you need to say, or, you know, do what you need to do or not do what you shouldn't do, right? I think when you begin conversations that way, it doesn't become accusatory. It doesn't become like uh, looking for moments of I gotcha. It's truly I'm asking because I want to help. I'm asking because I want you to know that I will always be here for you to help you prepare for whatever life throws at you. Because my goal as a parent is to be preparing you for independence, right?
Mm.
And you're never going to learn independence if you don't experience something. And that would be something else that I would look to do is find out what kinds of experiences they want to have and be willing to be with them in those experiences, even if it's something you have no interest in, right? We talk about this in marriage too, right? Like you got to take interest in what they're interested in, even if you have no interest at all, right? So important with our kids because they're probably going to do it anyway, right?
And
So
we kind
do
of
we want
wanna
to do
be
it?
involved a little bit, right? Like, so
Right,
if we're gonna wanna be involved, they really wanna do it, you know?
right, right.
Um, oh my gosh. Well, I love that too, and I'm very much in the early years, and so I'm thinking about how that also looks right now where it's like anything that I wanna do, they wanna be involved in, right? Like, and then the pendulum kinda swings the other way where it's like, okay, I'm no longer necessarily as reliant on mom
Right.
and dad. And then you kind of wanna still maintain that relationship and closeness. Um,
Sure.
that oftentimes in families, there's disagreements. I think every family has those.
Mhm. Sure.
So for families that disagree internally, maybe especially when it comes to that transition or like the view of independence, maybe mom sees things one way or wants one
Yeah.
path, dad wants another, the teen wants a
Mhm.
third, right? Like, how do you help like de-escalate and maybe align as a family in those moments where it feels like
Mhm.
everyone's moving in different directions?
Yeah. I will say, I've been blessed with an incredible partner for 30, it'll be 33 years this summer. All of our 6 adult children are, successful in their own path and whatever, they've chosen to do and in relationships and, child rearing themselves, right? One of the things we were always very committed to was the idea of a kind of a united front, right? In terms of the kids. So what does that look like if you're truly not united, right? Well, you don't know you're not united until you have a chance to talk through whatever it is, right? So what one of the things was we always talked about, we started with the question, if one of the kids came to me, I would say, "Have you already talked to mom about this?" So there was one of two answers, right? There was either no, then it would be, well, I'm going to talk to your mother and then we'll circle back and we'll revisit this, right? The other was, have you talked to your mother about this? Yes. Well, what was the answer, right? Well, if mom said yes, oh, well, if mom said yes, then why did you need to ask me, right? Or mom said no. Well, then it was really like, well, then why are you asking me, right? It was this whole notion of saying like, no, we are neither one of us are ever going to make a decision, without clarity. So sometimes that means that we have to go behind closed doors, right?
Mm.
That my wife and I would have to say, and it very rarely happened because we generally were in sync. But when we weren't, we never had the conversation openly in front of the kids. It was always a let's just kind of go inside and let's talk through what do you see, and then we would come to a consensus, and then we would be united on it.
Mhm.
So I think the most important thing is the kids have to know that there is no playing mom against dad or dad against mom, right? And I know that's particularly hard in situations with where there's multiple parents or there's a split, and it's kind of like adversarial. That's obviously a lot more challenging and a lot more difficult. But in cases like that, it's even more important that we focus on the kids and not on each other. I want to tick you off. I want to do anything that's going to hurt you. But what is that really doing for your child? And so if we focus on the child, we can cast our own differences aside. We can hash it out at whatever level of volume we need to hash it out. But in the end, we're still going to be unified in front of the kids.
Yeah.
So that would be my approach there. So that again, just from experience, I feel like that has really led, and honestly has led. I mean, we've had our kids in the house with their spouse, and they've disappeared for 45 minutes. And we realize it's because something was just discussed that one of them didn't like, and they've decided to go privately and talk through it to come back out and be on the same page. So it's like it's modeling, right?
Oh, absolutely. Oh my gosh, I love this. And I think like this idea of connection and relationship and communication is just like this interwoven thread in the little like sub conversations that we're having here. I want to maybe go like a step further when it comes to, when your teen might be asking for advice or when you're wanting to interject some advice on a situation. I love that you had already kind of talked about that posture of curiosity and asking
Mhm.
questions, leading with questions. Um, I also want to come back to like maybe why is the relationship part so important to focus on before you can provide the direction or the advice piece. And then for families that might be struggling with that relationship piece, maybe if you have any advice on how they can kind of start to, you know,
Mhm.
improve that or strengthen that.
So you're an educator, so you've probably heard this before, okay? But we have a saying that says that kids don't care how much you know until they know how much you care, right? So
Absolutely.
that's life 101,
Hmm.
right? Even experiencing this in one of the ministries that I work with, right? There are people who believe that being bold about your faith means beating you over the head with it. And then there's my approach, which says, like, I'm not going to tackle anything challenging, anything where I want to push you to a certain limit until I know that you trust me, until I know that until you know that I genuinely care about you. And so that way, when we open those conversations, it's a safe place. It's not a matter of me trying to win an argument, right? Or trying to win you over to my side. And I think it's very similar in that, regardless of the age of our children, like we have to have a willingness to say, if the answer is no, do you understand why the answer is no? And if you can reiterate to me and you can explain to me why you think my answer is no, and you get it accurately, then I'm beginning to sense that we truly do understand each other. You don't like the decision, but you understand why. But if your explanation for why you think I made that decision is off base, then I got to clarify that. This is really not about power. This is really not about expense. This is really not about, it's about maybe some kind of character issue or moral code or the company that you're with or trusting somebody else, whatever it may be. Then it begins to become a conversation. So the next time out, you're already thinking through, like I said, with my daughter and her boyfriend at the time, right? Like, I'm already thinking through. I I think my parents will have concerns about safety. I think they'll have concerns about transportation. I think they'll have concerns. But if we're proactive in thinking about that, then I think when we bring that to the table, I think they'll be a lot more receptive to the idea, right?
Hmm.
So I think we start forming that very early on. I don't think we wait until they're, 15, 16 to start doing that. We start when they're 10, 11. Why do you think I made that decision? Why do you think you were punished? Why do you think, right, that I'm upset with you right now based for what just happened? Then we begin to kind of get in sync. And so I think it's about understanding why. And then I think it's also about opportunities to say, okay, what what are you not getting to do that you want to do, right? And understand that I'm not necessarily going to say, just go ahead and do it. I'm going to probably be alongside you. I'm going to have to talk about it, right? But what is that thing you want to experience?
Yeah.
Let's see if there's a way that we can make that work where I can give you that opportunity. And that begins to build that connection to that level of they really aren't about taking away all my fun, and not remembering what it's like to be a teenager. They're just trying to connect with me on a level where they still love me and care about me, but they're trying to help me grow and mature at the same time.
I love that perspective. Unlike the front loading piece of like, yeah, we're
Yeah.
still going to talk about it because you're not going to just like go out there and flounder on your own. Like, I don't want to
Mm.
see that as a parent either. Right.
Right.
And I'm going to throw in a little bit from my kids because they're a little younger. But one of the things that is a topic of conversation in our household is a cell phone. And it's like our kids are homeschooled. They don't need a cell phone. They're always with mom or dad. Like, we're always together. And so one of the things is that it's like we're saying no right now. Not that it's a no forever, but also these are some of the things that we need to see in you that we know that you can be responsible enough when the time comes to actually
Right.
get a cell phone. And so
Right.
then that's what we are in reinforcing is like, are you responsible with doing your chores without being asked? Like, are you responsible with your schoolwork? Like, is this going to become a distraction or a potential like addiction, right? Like, there's like the whole piece, like social
Oh, yeah.
media is totally off the table.
Hmm.
But like, why do you even want a cell phone? Like, what's the
Hmm.
purpose of that for you?
Yes. Great
Uh,
question.
and so all of the above. And so I think too, setting up that structure for families that might be listening and like seeing the teen years coming, um, setting that structure for the conversation early on can also hopefully make those conversations when it comes to those teenagers a little bit easier because they're like, oh yeah, I know mom is always gonna, have this conversation with me. Or
Mhm.
like this is this is something to be expected at this point, right?
Mhm.
So I love that you talk about that. What about those kiddos that are like really guarded or might be like shut down where you can't really like just won't entertain a conversation with you, I guess, around those things and it
Mhm.
really means a lot for them, but they're
Mhm.
also,
Mhm.
a little more resistant.
I always just kind of call it the law of the low hanging fruit, right? I mean,
Mhm.
there if you have any kind of a relationship with your child, you know what makes them tick, right? You know what makes them, open up, you know what makes them feel comfortable and feel safe, right? So you go there, I mean, if the kid's a, baseball fan, and you're trying to talk about their day and you're trying to talk about whatever, you just have a, you start liking and taking an interest in what they take an interest in.
Mm.
Right? So you can say, "Boy, I just read today that, I'm a Mets fan. I have to admit that, right? So, say like the Mets today, they let that the guy that was, they let him go as a free agent. Like, I mean, what do you think of that? Now, I mean, what kid who likes baseball, right? Even if they don't want to talk to mom and dad are going to be like, nothing. I don't think anything about that, right? You gotta watch all that. But then it can lead potentially to a conversation about so how do you think that they make those kinds of decisions about who to hold on to and who not, how much to pay them? Next thing you know, you're having a conversation because you've taken an interest in something that they're interested in.
Mm.
And it may be something you know nothing about. So as you start to learn or as you start to then you begin to go back to them and say, "Hey, I read this today. What can you tell me more about that?" My daughter is really good with my grandson about that. He's 8 and he's into getting into baseball. And she was never really into baseball, but now as a baseball mom, right? She's trying to learn about baseball. And so she asks him all kinds of questions all the time that he answers in a way like, "Oh, I'm teaching my mom something about this," right? So, and that's also hard because he has an older sister who is in competitive cheer, who is incredibly gifted and talented. And so there's a lot of time and attention spent with what she does, right? So
Yes.
even more so, like I've got to take an interest in what you're interested in. So you know that you're not second fiddle and you're not, plan B here, right? I've got to pour into you too. So I think it's a matter of low hanging fruit. What do you know they love? What do you know they're passionate about? Where do you know they love to go? Like, hey, let's go to the mall.
Mhm.
You need a new pair of sneakers anyway. Let's go to the mall. Let's just walk around. We'll stop and get you a pair of sneakers, right? Again, and then what are you doing while you're on the way? You're talking. He has something to look forward to. You're going, and then it just changes the context, right? So we got to think about where we are, what we're talking about, and just keeping it low hanging fruit. Don't go right for the what's your pain point today? What's the hardest thing that happened to you today? Nothing. That's going to be your answer, right? So start with the things that we know they're comfortable talking about, make them a resource for us to learn more about something, and then conversation just begins to come and flow more naturally.
I love that too, because you can usually pick up on those things whether they explicitly tell you or not. Like if you just observe for a little bit, you're like, oh yeah, they're really into this game, or they're really into this sport, or they've been talking about how their friends are, getting onto this new trend or something like 6, 7. Oh my goodness. Like
Sorry.
how we started this. Big brothers have taught little sisters. So our 2.5-year-old is now saying 6, 7,
Oh
which
boy.
is just lovely.
Sorry.
Um, but I think one of the other things too that parents might be facing, and I know that I speak from personal experience, is like this backdrop of technology in our
Yeah.
lives and how kids, number one, it's like super accessible, right? And as we see like AI that's becoming maybe more feeling human, whatever, the lines are starting to blur between tool and tech and human
Yeah.
relationships. So
Big.
sometimes we're seeing too, like in the middle school and high school years, that they're going to that first for comfort or answers and maybe even identity pieces.
Yep.
So as kids are turning to technology more and this is becoming an impacting, factor on relationships,
Yeah.
how would you frame that for families to think about, or any kind of guidance that you want to give there?
Yeah, I love what you were talking about with your 9-year-old son. So my oldest granddaughter is 11, right? And so again, being a highly competitive cheer, she's around a lot of 13, 14, 15-year-olds right now. My daughter has not given her full range to social. She has a phone that has Wi-Fi that's kind of restricted so that she can basically go to, I think, like couple sites that they've given her and that she can communicate with them, right? At this point, she's still only 11. And so one of the things that we do is we give them like unadulterated access to the entire world, right? By just giving them this for entertainment.
Right.
And I think we have to begin to focus on the trends that we're seeing in this social media, 100% access from birth. And what we're seeing is the access to information is increasing anxiety, it's increasing depression, it's increasing suicide rates, right? So to me, the conversation is always around, again, what are some things that we did together as a family that that you love, that you wish we could do again? Something you did with a friend that you really love that you wish you could do again. And then identify when because most of the time it's not going to have anything to do with technology. And then compare that to the hour or whatever spent scrolling through something, what do they call that? Doom scrolling, right? Or whatever it is, where you just get lost in it and say, like, so what benefit did that, how'd that make you feel, right? And more times than not, it's going to be, well, it was kind of just a lot of time and I don't really feel anything, right? Or it seems like everybody else's life is so fun and so whatever, and I don't, right? And those bring up those conversations again about what's real and what's fantasy. And so if you can begin to have a child understand at an early age to always to focus on the things that bring you joy. And the underlying theme to that is it's relational. It's something that you did with someone, a conversation, an experience, a group of friends doing something together, right? As opposed to a group of friends sitting around where everybody's on their phone, right? And so the earlier we can begin to focus on, think about where you are and what you really enjoy, what really makes you like, what makes you think in a way, right? That's going to get better by incorporating and infusing technology into your life. We've had, in my experience as an educational leader, right? We've had parents who have taken away the technology, right, as a punishment for something. And there have been kids at the end of that time that said, I don't want it back.
Mhm.
Because all of a sudden, all the social media bullying, all of the I got to keep up with, I got to compare, it was almost like freeing that all of a sudden I was like, I'm not burdened by that anymore. And that unburdening of that was like, I feel so much better. I'm happier. I'm less stressed. I don't even want it. Give me a phone that just makes phone calls. That's it. That's all I want. Maybe texts. That's it. So I think the earlier we begin to kind of recognize what are the things that bring us joy, it's really hard to imagine that what brings me joy is spending 2 hours scrolling through Instagram, right? I mean,
Yeah.
ask any kid that. No, it's about that time that I went with my friend. Well, so here we go. What's the difference in the two? So let's spend a little more time doing those things that are fulfilling, that are, that you're enjoying and you're gaining value from, as opposed to things that are honestly just a waste of your time and just making you feel depressed and sad. So that's what it is to me. And I know I have two programs that if it's okay for me to mention them, because these are people that I've worked very closely with that have built what I think are some phenomenal resources for parents who might be struggling with that. One of them is called Conversation. And no, that's not that is a combination of conversation and relationship, right? Conversation. I would suggest Google it and take a look at the resource. What it is intended to do is help prepare, like you said, Jess, prepare parents to be able to release technology to their children. Technology is not evil. It's like money is not evil, right? It's how you use it, right? So helping them prepare earlier to understand limitations, to be able to put boundaries up, all of these things, so that when they are ready, technology doesn't consume their life. And a lot of parents don't know how to do that. Conversation teaches them how to do that. They actually have this digital academy where at the end, the kid can earn a certificate. Then that earning that certificate now tells the parent that they're ready for the technology. It's phenomenal. It's taken years for them to develop, and they've piloted it, and it's phenomenal. The other is actually a school-based program called the Positivity Project, and it is all about the 24 character strengths that come from positive psychology that teach kids the skills early on, from pre-K all the way through, the skills that are demonstrated in people whose lives are positive, who have positive impact, who have a positive outlook. And there's been studies not only in multiple nations, multiple contexts. These are the consistent factors, and they teach them, and through a language that they hear over and over again from class to class, from every experience, reinforced at home. And it has brought attendance rates up, discipline down. It is a tremendous program that so I recommend those two as resources for people to look into for their personal use for conversation and for school implementation in Positivity Project. I think those are two tremendous resources. We need to get the word out.
Oh my gosh, I love that. And we'll make sure to include the links too in the show notes for listeners as well, directly to those resources. And I think you had mentioned those at some point and during our meeting as well. And I
Yeah.
think Positivity Project also has a home-based or parent-focused program as well. So for parents that are listening in, you could start there, then bring it to your school. Those are great opportunities and resources for those that are listening in. As we close up the conversation today, you know, this isn't all going to change or shift, or we're going to have like some magical wand that changes how things are in
Mhm.
our household overnight. So maybe what's like one small change that a family can make this week, today, tonight, tomorrow, whatever, that actually increases the connection and decreases the feeling of like everyone's in their own lane or in their own separate worlds.
I have two things, and I got to lead in with one that's a story that I still to this day I use in any talks that I give or any training that I do. I remember my oldest daughter bringing home a friend one time in high school. I think she was probably 14. The friend, we invited her over for dinner, and so she stayed for dinner. And we got 6 children, right? So if there's 9 of us around the table, we prayed together before the meal. She was Jewish too, I believe, right? So we prayed together. It didn't matter. You're in our house, right? So we prayed together, and it was like a family of 9. It was loud. It was like crazy. It was laughing, and there was, just all this kind of stuff. And so my daughter asked her afterwards. We found this out later. She asked her afterwards. She said, "I'm sorry if my family overwhelmed you," and she said, "No, that was amazing." And she said, "What, like, how so?" Because she had a sibling. And this struck me so much to the core. She said, "My family has never sat down and had a meal together my entire life." I thought, she's 14. Like, how's that possible? And my daughter probably, being my daughter, right? She pressed her. She's like, how? She says, no, her dad was in some kind of profession or he worked late nights. And she said, well, what about vacations? Are you going on vacations? No, we go on vacations, My dad likes to golf and do whatever. And they never sat and had a meal together.
Wow.
So when you talk about something that you can do, the first thing is commit to having a meal together, right? Figure out a way to work out that schedule so you are all breaking bread around the table together and you are just talking about your day. You're talking about news. You're talking about something you saw on TikTok, whatever it is, right? But you're finding that point. My wife watches a TV show called Blue Bloods, I think it is. It's a police officers in New York, right? And these are people who are all over the place. They're like they're family, but I think it's every Sunday, there's 15 of them around the table having dinner together and they're having conversation and they, no matter where they are committed to being around that table. So if it's not every day, several times a week, find a way to break bread and have a meal together. And the second thing, I mentioned this earlier, I would just say is we've got to, as parents, ask our kids what they want to do and be willing to kind of take a step into their world. We've got to be willing to do things that maybe make us uncomfortable to find out what they're into, to understand, even if we have absolutely no interest, if we're going to make that connection, we have got to take an interest in them. And to take an interest in them means taking an interest in what they're interested in. So those would be my two things that I would say would be small things that you can do, no matter how old your children are, no matter what you have going on in life, make a commitment to those two things.
Oh my goodness. Well, Dan, thank you so much for joining us again on the podcast. The episode was full of those tips, tricks, hacks, however you want to describe it, for how we can kind of reposition our thinking and reframing of these conversations, these relationships, trust building, communication, independence and confidence. All of those things are, big keywords that really stood out to me. If you're a parent listening in right now to a teen and you feel behind, know that you're not alone. The teen years can feel like a countdown timer, but what matters most isn't rushing into those decisions and conversations. As Dan had mentioned earlier, doing a little bit of front loading helps kind of level the playing field for everyone. And really, it's about rebuilding that connection, that safety, that trust, so that your teen can actually hear you again.
Mhm.
Because when relationships are strong, the guidance actually lands. And when the guidance lands, teens don't just comply, they actually grow. To our
Well,
listeners, until next time, remember that your teen doesn't need a perfect parent. They need a parent that they can reach. Thank you so much.